Hey everybody, it is November 5th, 2025, here with your nightly watch list video. Before we start to churn through a few of these names, let's just talk a little bit about what was going on in the market today. And I think, it's good that we just go ahead and get started with Solars. For me, this was kind of the group that was sticking out the most. CSIQ over the last 5 days, it's just been an absolute monster. And right with it, for solar, I have to mention this reversal bar in SEDG, just absolutely gigantic move back up today. I mean, when's the last time we've seen a candle like this off the lows into highs? I mean, just taking out 6-7 days of price action on the downside. I mean, just kind of abnormal the way this thing looks. But on earnings, really, really good to see. And when you think about it, Solars have actually been one of the groups which have been acting best within the market. So that's actually awesome. I want to say that, like, next to gold, Solars are actually one of the leading groups this year. So really, really nice to see that group waking up. TAN has just been in a really steady uptrend. JKS was a big one today. And just pretty much everywhere you looked. I even think ENPH was up double figures, coming off these lows. So that's good. Some of these names obviously look better than others, but really, really constructive action. And then really some nice action, what I thought was from the semiconductors, except one. And I think it had to do a little bit with Jensen's comment, but ultimately AMD gets picked up right at the 20 simple moving average. That was really nice to see. AVGO was reclaiming the 20 simple moving average today. TSM was doing its best to reclaim the 20 simple moving average today. Not quite, but it was pushing up there very nicely. LRCX was another one that I thought was acting really, really well today. Rambus, another one that was acting fantastic. So the semiconductor group, for the most part, was acting great. In after hours, ARM reported, and ARM was off to the races. And really not that crazy. I don't want to actually say it's off to the races and hype it up a little too much, but effectively, really nice push. It did fade back a little bit, a move all the way up to 176 and kind of faded back towards this 20 simple moving average. So we'll see kind of what that does tomorrow, but ultimately there were so many stocks today that were acting awesome on their individual earnings. Something like LITE really caught my attention. Really nice job gapping up and continuing on earnings. What was the other one? It was Lemonade, and this one actually had a pretty nice base going into that report. Lemonade, just a nice multi-week, multi-month, really about a 2-month base, and then gapping up absolutely massive volume. So definitely a name to be focused on going forward. Really nice to see. And, what can I say? It's like one day earnings aren't doing too much. The next day, stocks are acting awesome in the morning on their respective earnings. So we just gotta take it at face value. It is what it is. The market, pulled back, especially when you look at a name like Tesla. Just a bit, this is, kind of what the market's been doing here. A little bit of chop, but ultimately, like Tesla, stocks continue to find support at the key moving averages. So don't want to argue with price too much. Obviously, you started to look under the hood, and names were really getting beaten up. Breadth was kind of deteriorating, but price could, especially when you think about the market, things can only go in one of two ways. Either leaders start to catch up to names and deteriorate with the rest of the market, or option number two is the market begins to play catch up to some of the leaders because they've already gone through their decline. And in that case, that would actually improve breadth, allow the names that are already in cleanup trends to just be able to continue. And ultimately, that's kind of what it felt like today. We had a bit of an interesting scenario. It seems like maybe or maybe not some of the tariffs might be coming off the board. If that is the case, there were a bunch of stocks like all at the same time, a bunch of retail stocks all getting picked up right around the same time, all looking, like this exact same thing right around the same moment, whether it was an AEO, and I mean, literally, you could look around the board. I mean, even a Boot Barn doing the exact same thing right around the exact same time, just getting picked up vertical at one moment. And yeah, they all kind of did the same thing. Is that a group that, maybe we can pay attention to? Yeah, the group's been kind of acting, pretty poor. And even a TJ Maxx, right? Just a nice little steady ramp. And this one's got, basically a nice flat base breakout setting up. So everywhere you look, the retail names were getting picked up. Again, even a Lululemon, which is below the 200 simple moving average. It's like the algorithms all turned on at the exact same moment on the potential removal of the tariffs not being legal or what have you. But effectively, all these charts look the same. They all started ramping at the same time. So, do we get some more of that continued buying within that, consumer, that retail space? Maybe. I don't know. But just interesting to note there. And ultimately, stocks that were gapping up on earnings just got some really nice follow through today, especially if you were coming out of a clean setup. That was really, really nice to see. The memory stocks, whether it was MU, just continuing to be an absolute powerhouse. SNDK continuing to be a powerhouse. WDC, same deal. Even Bloom today was an absolute monster as well, hanging in there. I think at one point up double digits. Yeah, double digits. So this is kind of just doing its best to pause here for a little bit. That would be, kind of the most ideal scenario. But yeah, I mean, everywhere we looked, there was some massive, massive moves going on. And, it's hard to remain too negative when the market can really only play out in one of two directions. Like I said, where the market's either going to deteriorate with some of the leaders and give us more than a one-day pullback, or some of the names that have been lagging and already deteriorating are going to start to find a bid and then ultimately continue higher. That kind of seemed to be what was on the menu effectively. And yeah, I mean, that was super awesome to see. So very good in that regard. Solars, semiconductors, banks, another one that did kind of catch my eye. JP Morgan as well. This thing looks like it's probably trying to shoot out a little bit higher. We shall see. Goldman Sachs, another one. Wells Fargo, another one. Morgan Stanley, another one. Interactive Brokers. I mean, these things are all hanging out at highs and ultimately looking like they are trying to go higher. So, let's enjoy it while we got it. The market's not really giving us more than a one-day pullback or a two-day pullback. Things look a little bit shaky for a moment, but ultimately the market seems to have some other plans. Nvidia was the one that I found to be a little bit odd today. And really we could throw in maybe Microsoft in there as well. Right at the end of the day, Jensen said something to the effect of, China's going to win the AI race. And I think it had something to do with the fact that China is doing some kind of subsidies, I think, for the energy companies and powering their data centers. And I think that was Jensen's way of kind of, nudging at our government saying, hey, help out the energy companies to power the data centers, because effectively that is what is needed. Otherwise they're just, buildings that have no power, and they're basically just these useless buildings without it. So yeah, that is kind of an interesting development, but ultimately, Tesla paid the price for it just a little bit, and we are rebounding a little bit in after hours. And then Microsoft today, can't make too much of it. A little bit of weakness after this earnings report, and then you go nowhere, earnings report, and then you fade off. Microsoft not acting the best, but ultimately it doesn't really seem to be affecting the market too much. Small little bounce in Ethereum and crypto. I'm not entirely surprised about that. You get a pretty nasty washout right into the 200 simple moving average. You start to bounce a little bit. That is not surprising at all. And then similarly with Bitcoin, we talked about this in the room. You wash out under the 200 after a move down, a bounce into the 50, a move down, you undercut the 200. It's likely that anybody who shorted underneath the 200 as the first time you're shorting, gets shaken out, that wouldn't be too surprising at all. And then, really probably hit the declining 10, hit the declining 20, and then we probably continue to roll over from there, would be my expectation, unless, of course, this thing starts to actually show some relative strength versus the market, which it has not been able to do. So just kind of some food for thought, but really the market's acting, it's acting fantastic. The important part is the leaders are hanging in there, and we're getting new merchandise gapping up on earnings and following through. That is really, really nice to see. So with that, let's just kind of start to dive into some of these names that I think are pretty interesting for tomorrow. Tesla, I still think that this is looking pretty good. We'll keep an eye on it over that $470 level as a potential breakout. Obviously, Elon has his pay package. I'm going to assume it gets approved. It's, the $1 trillion pay package. Kind of insane to say that number out loud, but a $1 trillion pay package, if that gets approved, my assumption is, 480s, 490s, 500s coming to a theater near you. This weekly chart still looks absolutely phenomenal. It's just been chopping around a little bit after a base breakout. So really nothing wrong with it. And it's just a, kind of a sloppy high type flag, but here we are probably over $470. This thing could be off to the races. ARM that just reported earnings. I do not hate really what this thing looks like. It's got a huge base and then really just a pullback into the 50 simple moving average. Good volume that came into this thing today and gapping up overnight to 167. So we'll see if this thing can indeed take out the 20 simple moving average tomorrow. I would be comfortable, potentially getting long in another semiconductor name. This one would definitely be interesting because of the size of this base. TSM, yes, a tiny little bit of a rejection against the 20 simple moving average, but ultimately continues to build higher lows. I need to see this thing trading back above the 20. So ultimately, if we can get back above the 20 and back above today's highs, I could see myself adding to this, adding to this above the 20 as a higher low setup. AVGO, I thought this thing acted pretty dang fantastic today. Bouncing right off the 20. Of course, a slight little rejection off the 10-day, and that has to do with, Nvidia kind of dragging things lower. But if we can just go ahead and take out today's highs, I think that this uptrend could just be renewed right away. Dell is a name that I did cut yesterday. I did not like the way that this thing was closing below the 20 yesterday, and then I saved myself a little bit of a headache and a little bit of a washout. We did ultimately close lower than where I sold it, so I don't feel too bad about that. There is a chance that this can reclaim the 20 simple moving average. If it does, Nvidia is acting well, the markets are acting well, software stocks, semiconductors are acting well. I don't see why Dell cannot continue and then ultimately sooner rather than later go on to make a new high. Gold, I think, is interesting, but I won't be trading gold itself. But I have to give some honorable mention to a Kinross. Nice little push up today on earnings, a nice little pickup in volume. We paused right at the 20-day, so ultimately we can get going back above this 20-day with gold acting well. I think Kinross can potentially get itself into a renewed uptrend. Ideally, just stay above the 50 simple, and I want to see a little bit more evidence from stocks within its group. Something like Barrick looks pretty interesting. GFI got beaten up just a little bit, so maybe this one kind of comes back to life. Got beaten up yesterday, kind of comes back to life. Let's see if it can get back above the 50. AEM, NEM, WPM, these are also ones that could be watched for sentiment for the group. So those are definitely some that I will have, forefront of my mind. Robinhood, really don't hate what this thing looks like. Did absolutely nothing on earnings, effectively trading at flat, exactly where we closed. I really don't mind this as a potential entry. Yes, we're going to have a little bit of overhead supply and over $150. This thing will look good, but this thing has done a really, really nice job pulling back into the 50, coming back up, just kind of tightening up here. Let's see what happens when we get going over 145 and then 150 for some potential adds. I think that this could be interesting for some more continuation. On the Chinese equity side, Pinduoduo, Baba, Futu, I think these are acting well. This one pulled right back into the 20-day, found some support, really nice 2-day move, and then it seems like a small little gap up overnight. BABA, I actually bought this one today, right off of the 50-day, effectively trying to take out a 5-minute opening range break. Really, really nice to see with the stop at low of day. Did not hit, which is nice. And overnight, we are gapping up just a little bit. I would like to add to this position, but I don't know if I'll add to this one tomorrow, taking out today's highs. But when I look at BABA, when I look at KWeb, when I look at Futu, when I look at Pinduoduo, I still think, even Billy, I think that this, market has got some more room to go. Excuse me, not Billy, Baidu. I think this market has some more room to go. Really nice job on a pickup in volume yesterday. Today, not a bunch of movement at all. Tonight, we are gapping up a little bit with these Chinese equities. This one's one of those that kind of gaps around a little too much. That's exactly why I prefer a Alibaba, but ultimately, Baidu and KWeb and Pinduoduo, it does feel like, those names have definitely bottomed. And it's just a matter of trying to time out your entry and get along a moving train. Futu, again, right down to the 50-day, picked up very, very nicely. And you look at the weekly on this thing, you are just not far away from an all-time high and trading above that $200 level fairly cleanly. We'll see what happens. Even a little bit more digestion here would not be totally unexpected. MBIS, this one does have some earnings coming up, but ultimately also looks really, really good. Continues to pull back, potentially finding some support at the rising 50 simple moving average. And we are gapping up 120 plus in after hours, but we do have earnings coming up on the 11th. So maybe it doesn't do too much until then, but we will just make sure we leave this name on watch. NU, I still think this thing is trading pretty fantastic. This one also has earnings on the 13th, just far enough away that I would feel comfortable buying it if it's going to start to break out. Ideally, over 16 and a half, could be buyable. Nice so far, really almost a 2-month base. So new NU looks pretty dang good in my opinion. AVAV, this one didn't do a whole lot, but just leaving it on the radar. If we can stay above the 50 simple moving average, and in a few days, we will keep an eyeball on it and see if this thing wants to go. This one did get hit a little bit with, KTOS. You get the gap down, you get a pickup in volume, you're now below the 50. For me, that's just a no touch until we can reclaim the 50 simple moving average. So ultimately, just kind of sitting on the sidelines with some of these aerospace and defense names. And Rocket Lab, I closed yesterday, and today, trying to bounce off the 50. I don't really know what to make of it. If I go ahead and put some shares on tomorrow as a potential bounce off the 50 is yet to be determined, but we'll kind of keep that on watch. This one also has some earnings coming up on the 10th. So, 5 days away, and I think we can just kind of be patient for those earnings and, judge it at that point. ISRG is part of the XLV ETF, and the XLV ETF does indeed look like it has, potentially bottomed, gotten over the 200, building some higher lows, really looking like it's actually trying to go higher, which is kind of the expectation when you look at something like Lilly. Just super, super action for the last 5 days. Obviously today, little bit of a sell-off, but not going to make too much of it after 5 straight big up days in a row. In fact, for Lilly, I won't be too surprised if we're staring at a new all-time high, probably sooner rather than later. TMO is another name that's been acting pretty well, but kind of a little bit of a slow mover. And ISRG, yes, a little bit of a slow mover as well, but a really nice high type flag being set up there. So we'll just kind of keep that one on watch going forward. PL, love the way this is kind of setting up. You did have this nice flat base and then a nice earnings breakout, and you've done nothing wrong. Just an absolutely massive move. A little bit of a pullback, and we are tightening up really, really well here. We'll kind of keep an eye on this. If this thing can get going over 13 and a half and back above the 20 simple moving average, I think that PL could definitely get going once again. SoFi is another one. I think this one is tightening up really, really well here after earnings. you tried to break out earnings, and then you've just been tightening up. You've been trading sideways, which is, absolutely perfect. And really, this is starting to look like a really nice consolidation before ultimately, hopefully, going higher. WGS, another one. This thing is also starting to trade really, really tight on the right-hand side. Love how tight of a day this was. I have a little bit of an issue with WGS. It trades a little thin, but if you're not trying to take some massive position, WGS could be perfectly fine. And ideally, we're just kind of taking out this first wick. 142 could be good. If you could sneak yourself in just over yesterday's highs with the stop at low of day, I think that could be fine as well. AppLovin, gapping up on earnings. This name has been an absolute monster. Pull back into the 50, build some higher lows, tighten up, right up to the pivot. I think this thing looks pretty dang good. Over 655 would be pretty interesting. Lemonade, obviously, massive, massive move. We'll be kind of watching this thing, hopefully for a little bit of an inside day, and then, kind of your little fish hook that Scotland talks about all the time, or really just a high volume close. 79, 71 could be an interesting spot. LITE will be another one of these names that are just gapping up big on earnings and showing tons of strength. Are some that I would love to find myself in. And net is another one. A little bit of relative weakness today, but really on falling volume. I don't think that there's anything truly wrong with this name. Same thing with CrowdStrike. I don't think that there's anything truly wrong with these names. Maybe a little bit slow, so that could definitely be a reason to avoid. But I still believe buying pullbacks into ascending moving averages seems to be the play. It showed up in a pretty big way today, on a name like Tesla. The other mega caps didn't really have to do too much. Apple didn't do too much. Microsoft didn't do too much. Amazon didn't do too much. Google continues to just be really strong. AMD bounced in a big way after earnings. And ultimately, there is some new merchandise coming up through earnings season that is acting well. So really, we can just kind of continue to focus on that. Anyway, long-winded video today. Hopefully, you guys all traded well. I will see you guys all bright and early in the morning. Cheers.